All right, welcome back to the semifinal match of our Legacy Tour Huntsville Top 8. We have Landon Tynes versus Scott Taylor, Blue Red Delver versus Death and Taxes. Our players are going to go and shuffle up and get started. Hopefully we will have better fight out of this Delver deck than we did last time with the Grixis Delver. Had Landon Tynes on the top 8 earlier, playing a Delver deck, no wastelands, playset of Price of Progress, and an Is It Charm in the main board. Pretty sweet stuff. Storm Chaser Mage as well. Did better than I was expecting it to. That was definitely a cool thing to see. We'll see how he can fare against Death and Taxes. Looks like Scott Taylor will be taking a mulligan. Landon, I think, satisfied with his 7. See a hand of Mirror Crusader, Stoneforge Mystic. I think that's a Wasteland, a Plains, a Swords to Plowshares, and one other card. Not 100% sure. Then we'll start us off with a Flooded Strand into a Volcanic Island into a Delver of Secrets. The Delver will take a Swords to the Plowshares to the face. Pass the turn back to Landon. Lightning Bolt the draw for turn. You see a Monastery Swift Spear. That'll be the creature he plays. Swift Spear will get it for 1. No follow-up land. Second Plains for Scott. First a Swords on the Swift Spear. "21 life for Landon. Looks like a Snapcaster Mage as the draw for turn. A powerful card, but not very useful when you're only on 1 land. Scott will take his turn and play a Stoneforge Mystic. Like Sword of Fire and Ice and Batterskull are both very powerful options. He will opt for the Umezawa's Jeet. Stoneforge will eat a Lightning Bolt. Batterskull would be a very good equipment to get for this matchup. Unfortunately, it's a really difficult card to cast if your Stoneforge dies. So for what happened just there, if he had gotten a Batterskull instead, that card would be stranded in his hand for a long time. And then it's also a possible daze target in the late game for Landon. That would make those cards alive again after they would have otherwise outlived their usefulness. A Flickerwisp and a Delver of Secrets will be the creatures played by each player. The Flickerwisp will exile Rishadan Port, so that Landon will have no mana on the next turn. Rishadan Port will re-enter the battlefield at the end step. I have to assume he won't be Rishadan Porting instead. No, he will. Okay. So either he would Rishadan Port or he would sacrifice the Horizon Canopy end of turn to draw a card. In response to the port, Landon will use a red mana to Lightning Bolt the Flickerwisp. Mountain the draw for turn. Finally, a second land. He can find one more. Snap Bolt will be a live option. I think I see another Lightning Bolt and a Forked Bolt still in hand. A lot of good removal for Landon. Looks like Scott will play a Thalia, taking a fair amount of damage from this Horizon Canopy. And he will play a Mirror Crusader. Daze will flip the Delver of Secrets. In the face of Thalia, Daze not a very useful card, especially when you're so low on lands as Landon is. However, a Lightning Bolt could end that Thalia without too much trouble. As well, if Scott does try to play something, Landon can use a 2-mana Lightning Bolt to kill the Thalia, and then still have Daze as a possibility by returning that Volcanic Island, because he won't have to pay the 1-mana tax anymore from Thalia. Delver gets in. 21 to 13 are the life totals. Turn will go back to Scott. A lot of lands for Scott. Horizon Canopy is a pretty decent one to have, as it can turn into a draw card instead. Umezawa's Jeet will be played for 3 mana because of that Thalia. Wasteland will go after the Volcanic Island. Landon wants to use that Lightning Bolt. This is when he's going to have to do it. The unfortunate thing is, he can't guarantee that he can kill both of the creatures. If he shoots the Mirror Crusader now, which would be getting 4 Jeet counters, he does not have a second land to pay for the Thalia attacks on his next turn. He needs to draw another one if he wants to be able to remove that Thalia. However, Delver can still race that pretty well, so not in too bad a spot. Rishadan Port as well could be a problem if Scott ever gets the chance to start activating it. No cards in hand. I expect they'll probably start doing so pretty soon. And in reading the Jeet, if Thalia is allowed to be equipped and attack, it can use the 2 counters from Jeet to kill the Insectile Aberration. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything Landon can actually do about that. So attack for 3 seems like probably the best option to me. Scott will fall down to 9. Take his draw. Didn't get to see what it was. Put the Jeet on the Thalia and swing. Now with those 2 counters, he can either kill the Insectile Aberration or gain 4 life. He will sacrifice the Horizon Canopy to draw a card. Found 1 more Plains, and with this he will be able to tap the Mountain, cut Landon down to 0 mana, with the Thalia attacks as well. It was looking pretty good for Landon, but at this point, it's not looking like there's much that Landon can do to get out of this. If Scott opts not to kill the Insectile Aberration this turn and just take the 3 damage, he will be able to save his Thalia from a Lightning Bolt, or he can just use the ones that he'd get if he attacks next turn. In response to a Lightning Bolt, he could use the counters to +2/+2 Thalia, and it would survive any of the burn spells in Landon's deck. That Thalia will attack, knock Landon down to 15. Price of Progress as well, not a very useful card against Death and Taxes. A 4-mana Sword of Fire and Ice will join the battlefield. Equipment really being problematic for the Delver deck to deal with. So once that's equipped to Thalia, Lightning Bolt's not even going to be a possibility. It's already not very good because of the Jeet. Sacrifices fetch land. Expect probably to get a Volcanic Island. Possibility that this may actually be in response to the sword and his account as well. I know he has a Daze, but Scott has the mana to pay for it. If he has a Force as well, he could Force as well that Sword of Fire and Ice. And that would, with the sacrifice fetch land, he would be able to pay for it. The Thalia, that is. Incomplete thoughts. Reading Jeet once again. Against creature decks, this card can really be a beating. No, the Sword will resolve. Fortunately, Landon has no main deck answers to those cards. They really give Death and Taxes a huge advantage having those active equipments. Just so hard to deal with. See Landon reading the equipment a couple times. Yeah, I don't know what he could do to get out of this one. 9 is too high of a life total to be realistically burned out, especially with the Jeet counters gaining life. By using the counters, you can get as much as a batter skill hit a turn by swinging with that Jeet. I think it might be a Forge Bolt that Landon's going to go for. One on the Thalia and one on Scott. I guess he was just testing to see if Scott knew to use the +2/+2 mode to save his Thalia. He did, and that will be the end of the first game. We will turn to the sideboards. Landon Tynes has a Mindbreak Trap, a Submerge, 2 Back to Basics, an Exquisite Firecraft, 2 Smash to Smithereens, a Pyroblast, 2 Red Elemental Blasts, 2 Sulfuric Vortexes, an Izzet Static Caster, and 2 Surgical Extractions. Of these, I expect probably the Smash to Smithereens and Izzet Static Caster to come in. As mentioned earlier, Death and Taxes has a lot of low toughness creatures, so that Static Caster can really do a lot of work there. Smash to Smithereens is just an answer to the equipment that we saw do so much work in this game. The Submerge and Back to Basics and stuff, not terribly good. Death and Taxes plays a lot of basics, and it's not a sort of deck that Submerge is going to be super good against. That tempo play isn't going to do too terribly much. Out of Scott Taylor's sideboard, 2 Containment Priest, 2 Spirit of the Labyrinth, 3 Aetherswind Canonist, 2 Pithing Needle, 1 Seal of Cleansing, 3 Rest in Peace, 1 Path to Exile, and 1 Council's Judgment are his options. As we saw last round, I expect probably pretty minimal sideboarding. The Path to Exile can do pretty good, although Landon does actually play basics that he could get, so we may not see that one come in. The Aetherswind Canonists aren't great, the Pithing Needles aren't great. The Spirit of the Labyrinth can be okay. Landon does play a pretty high number of cantrips, so drawing Brainstorms with a Spirit of the Labyrinth on the table is really, really bad. Aside from that, Nothing else looks really super great. Probably fairly minimal sideboarding on both sides, aside from those Smash to Smithereens and the Staticaster. Those are probably the most impactful cards that Landon could be bringing in. He could see the Sulfuric Vortex come in, um, if he's afraid of something like Batterskull gaining life. Didn't watch the player sideboard, so I guess we could have potentially seen some cards. You guys may know more than I do at this point because I was looking at the deck lists. The other deck is really a deck that preys on other fair creature decks, so this is one of the matchups that they were hoping for more than likely. Delver decks. Just a lot of the different effects that Death Decks has going on can be really difficult for Delver decks to deal with. Wastelands are all good. The removal's good. The equipment's good. The life gain is good. Mother of Runes is great. So not a lot that Death and Taxes is doing that doesn't help it against Delver decks. And on the other hand, a lot of what Delver wants to be doing isn't super great against Death and Taxes. Counterspell's not super good. Um, Playing one creature and trying to protect it is kind of a difficult thing to do against a deck like Death and Taxes. It's got 4 swords, it's got flying blockers, it has first strike creatures galore. Umezawa's Jeet can get in through things like color protection. This could be a very, very difficult deck to deal with. It can attack from a lot of different angles. Players will draw their opening hands. Looks like they're both happy with the 7. Landon will start us off with a Polluted Delta. Wouldn't be surprised to see a basic land. We've seen so many of these Delver decks have problems with mana. He opts to get a Volcanic Island instead. May have a red creature to play turn 1 and not have a way to get the basic mountain. Just a moment we shall see. And he will not play anything. He will simply pass the turn back. Scott will play a Wasteland into an Aether Isle. See if Landon has any interest in countering this. I think he has a Daze in hand. Looks like he will Brainstorm. Would not be surprised to see the Daze come out after this. 2 lands and I think a Swift Spear with a draw. We'll put 2 of the lands back. And the Daze will go after that Aether Isle. If it's not for the Aether Isle, there aren't a lot of other things that you can use it for. A lot of the time after they play the Aether Isle, all of Death and Taxes' lands will be spent taxing the other player's lands, so counterspells have a very, very quick expiration date. And we'll fetch up another Volcanic Island. Not scared of that Wasteland, even a little bit. See a Monastery Swiftspear join the party. Get in for 1. That's a 20 turn clock, the fastest in Legacy. Crocus, I believe, was the draw for turn. I think I saw an Umezawa's Jeet in Scott's hand. Maybe a Spirit of the Labyrinth as well. And that is what it is going to be. That's rather unfortunate. I think Landon has at least one more cantrip in hand, so those have just been, if not turned off, made significantly worse. Ponder can still be cast just to look at the top three, but you can't draw a card afterwards, as you have to be doing it on your main phase after you've drawn for turn. Forked Bolt will go ahead and cleanly answer the Swift Spear, trigger prowess as well. Turn will go back Scott's way. You'll draw, it looks like a Thalia, Guardian Thraben. Wasteland unfortunately not being able to be used yet, as Scott looks like he's only on 2 lands. A lot of his creatures being 2-drops. He cannot afford to get rid of that Wasteland, as he hasn't drawn another land, obviously. If he had that Aether Vial from turn 1, this would be a much different game. Thankfully, Landon was able to stop that from happening. Delver of Secrets to draw for turn. Plays another Wasteland. Fortunately, I don't know that Landon can trigger Prowess this turn, which means that Swift Spear can't swing. So he will have to just pass the turn back to Death and Taxes. Scott Taylor. Scott will draw. I think he might have just drawn a Caracas. Very awkward having multiple Caracas as your only white sources. A land being legendary can bite you kind of often, and I think Death and Taxes generally plays 3 of them. Scott will float a white mana, play another Caracas, cast a Stoneforge Mystic. We'll see what he tutors up. It's sort of Fire and Ice. I think he did have the Jeet in hand, so that one's already been found. So we saw his equipment that did so much work in the last game start to show up again. I believe a Delver of Secrets was the draw again for Landon this turn. Polluted Delta will be his land for turn. Not flipping that Delver is unfortunate. There's a lot of really powerful cards in Scott's hand. Not being able to start getting in for damage is kind of unfortunate for the Delver deck. With the long game, I think, definitely favors the Death and Taxes player. Especially once he starts finding more lands. Another Delver of Secrets will join the battleground. As soon as he's able to flip those will start being very problematic. 6 damage a turn is not a small amount by any means. So an Aether Vial was the draw, but I think Scott probably wants to put in that Umezawa's Jeet, so he won't play it. Didn't get to see the card Landon drew. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it flipped his Delvers. Unfortunate thing is that Scott can put in the Jeet this turn and then equip it. Because those Delvers didn't flip, they're still 1/1s, so that Thalia can kill both of them in the next turn. I don't believe that Landon has an answer to... No, he has a Snapcaster Mage, and I believe he has a Bolt in the graveyard. So he would be able to kill whatever creature Scott equips the Umezawa's Jeet to. So he'll have one more chance to flip the Delvers before they just die to the Jeet. It's going to be a main phase flash in that Snapcaster. We'll see if he decides to cast. Excuse me. The forked bolts put 1 damage on each. Might even just swing in the team then, as if Stoneforge Mystic blocks, it dies, and then he won't have a creature to equip the G2. Unless it will be an attack for, I believe that was 4. Knocks Scott down to 12. And I don't think Landon had the Lightning Bolt, which would have been the better option, as he would have been able to bolt whatever creature Scott was equipping the G2, and then prevent, basically just time walk Scott for a turn. As is, he will attack triumphantly his equipped Squire. Get those 2 counters. I suspect probably just snipe off both of the Delvers before they get another chance to flip. Landon will block the Stoneforge with a Snapcaster Mage. The G counters will go after each of the Delvers. Landon left with a single Monastery Swift Spear after the smoke clears. Aether Vial will be cast. Looks like a Lightning Bolt. Swift Spear. So between that 2 Swift Spears, that Lightning Bolt represents 5 total damage. If it's going upstairs, that is. Landon with a Force of Will and a Lightning Bolt in hand. Unfortunately, can't hardcast that Force of Will just yet, as he's only on 4 lands. Scott opts simply to pass the turn. On the upkeep, he Path to Exiles a Swift Spear. The danger here is that if Landon does have a counterspell, the Swift Spears would get prowess triggers. The upside, of course, is that if Path resolves, the basic land that Landon gets to search for comes in tapped. Another Lightning Bolt to draw for turn. So that, with the Swift Spear, represents a total of 9 damage. Could put Scott at 1, apologies, this turn. I believe the players are discussing priority regarding Irishadon Port at the moment. So we will get in. So a Lightning Bolt will make it a 2-3. We'll knock Scott down to 5. I think a Plains that'll draw for turn. That's fortunate because Scott can now play or Violin and equip a 2-mana creature. If he wants, he could Violin a 2-mana creature and have a Irishadon Port activation. Although, in the face of 5 lands, that gets a lot worse, I suppose. Spirit of the Labyrinth will be the creature he opts to cast. Then equip that creature with the Jeet. I think pass the turn back. fetch land, the draw for turn out of Landon. So he can Lightning Bolt the Spirit of the Labyrinth, and then attack with his Swift Spear, and knock Scott down to 3. At that point, any other Lightning Bolt or even a Snapcaster Mage is lethal. The other option is he could simply pass the turn and then bolt whatever creature Scott equips the G2 and attacks with. Unfortunately, that gives Scott another chance to just play out an attacker, or rather a defender, to block that Swift Spear the following turn. And at that point, Scott's still at 5, and the board is getting much more gummed up. Lightning will go after the Spirit of the Labyrinth. Swift Spear will come in for 2. Scott will fall down to 3, assuming he doesn't have any cheeky 0-mana plays. Or he could just violin a creature. If he has a Sarah Avenger, that 3/3 would be a very, very good blocker for the 2/3. Looks like it will just be a Stoneforge Mystic though. Force of Will doing no good against the Stoneforge being vialed in. I think Batterskull the only option for Scott to go look for now. That will be it. Scott will chump block the Swift Spear. Not looking terribly bad for Landon, but I suspect he may be on borrowed time. After being choked on mana for so long, Scott must have a number of good cards in hand. Well, it goes up to 3. I see a Flickerwisp, the sword, the Batterskull is still in there somewhere. So Thalia will be cast. Interesting to see if Landon forces this. He does. That seems like a good idea. I agree. Thalia will be countered. If it weren't for the Vial on 3 and the Flickerwisp, a Lightning Bolt would be a lethal draw here. Unfortunately, Swift Spear could just be Flickerwisped, and then that 2 damage would be prevented, and Scott would survive. Volcanic Island will be tapped by the Rishalon Port. Another Swift Spear will be the draw. So Flickerwisp will go ahead and exile one of those Swift Spears, and then one of them will get in for 4, or for 1 rather, and knock Scott down to 4. Very, very grindy game 2. Horizon Canopy looks like the draw for Scott. He will simply pass the turn back? Or did I miss-see that? No, he will play the Horizon Canopy. I was mostly wrong about Scott having good cards in hand. He has the 2 equipment. But that's about it. Flickerwisp will attack. So with that, he could gain 4 life or kill one of the Swift Spears. I suspect he'll probably wait on that until he's forced to make a decision, if he is. If Landon draws a Lightning Bolt, killing one of the Swift Spears means that he would die, but he could wait until Landon has to cast the bolt and then just gain life. Ooh, I think it was a Smash to Smithereens. That's a pretty useful one. That actually might just do it. He swings in and passes the turn back, I believe. Smash to Smithereens does deal damage, doesn't it? Let me go look this up as well. Yeah, yeah, it would bolt him. So because I think Landon knew at that point No, I'm not sure he ever saw the Sword of Fire and Ice. So that means that there could have been one other card. Because having perfect information, smash to smithereens on the Umezawa's Jeet would, I believe, kill Scott. Because that would be 3 damage plus 2 prowess triggers. No, I think I would knock him down to 1. My mistake. Because Scott could gain 4 life off of the Jeet. It's like Scott might be activating his Jeet, but there are still 4 counters on it, so it's not quite clear. This is a smash to smithereens on one of the equipment. I don't know if Landon let him hit him with the equipment's on. Looks like he might have. I think that may be a mistake. So I think Scott shrank one of the Swift Spears so that it would still die to the Sword of Fire and Ice trigger, and then gained 6 life with the rest of the counters. Back to 5. Landon will draw a Delver of Secrets. It's unfortunate. I'm not sure that there was a way to navigate around the Jeet counters so that all of your guys wouldn't just die with that smash last turn. Flickerbus will come in. I believe pointing to the Delver signifies that he's going to shoot that with the trigger. No, I was incorrect. Swiftspear will take the trigger. That is just a little off the field. Ooh, that's a good one. That's really unfortunate. That means even if Delver flips, it would be blocked. I think Landon may have just missed his Delver trigger because it looked like a smash to Smithereens he drew. That would have flipped Delver. He will still get that. So smash on the Sword of Fire and Ice would knock Scott down to 1. The only problem with smashing the Jit before combat damage means that with both the Sword of Fire and Ice trigger and the 2 counters already on the Jeet, both of Landon's Swift Spears would die. I don't remember exactly what Scott's life total was at the time. I think he was high enough that it wouldn't have killed him. I could just be wrong about that, and that would be the correct play. So it looks like the Flickerwisp will come in for a lethal attack. That will be the game. Umezawa's Jeet, very powerful card, difficult to navigate around. If Scott was still at 2, then yeah, I think smashing the Jeet just wins the game because that would put Scott down to it would put him down to 1 after he gains the life. No, that's wrong. He would gain 1, so it would put him to 3. And then the other Swiftspear wouldn't have died to the trigger. So yeah, that probably would have actually been the better option because the smash would have triggered prowess on the Swiftspears, so the 2 damage from the Sword of Fire and Ice trigger would no longer kill it. It's likely what the players are discussing. Whew. Very, very close game. Much better the game than some of the Delver decks were able to pull off against Death and Taxes. So that was our semifinal match, Blue-Red Delver versus Death and Taxes. We will move on to the finals. The other semifinals match was Jordan O'Hara on Death and Taxes versus James Hess on Elves. So the winner of that and Mr. Scott Taylor will be moving on to the finals. We will get that set up and be back here as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us. Stick around for our final round of awesome Legacy action. We will be back.